Morning, Lagos. Once again, you are tuned in to Smooth 98.1. I'm Shukman Martins, and this is Smooth Breakfast. The next half hour, it's all about news analysis on the national front because it's freshly pressed. Joining me in the studio for the next half hour for a Wednesday Hump of the Week edition of Freshly Pressed, I have got Devo Okore. Good morning.
Good morning, Lagos. Morning, Shopel Akunde. Cool. Nigerian women arise.
And Lakunle, good morning to you.
Good morning, Shopway. Good morning, Dibu. Good morning, Lagos.
All right, so Lagos, yes, Freshly Press has actually been going on for about already been going on for about a half hour. It's up on Instagram. It's up on our Instagram feed. You can find what went on before we came on air at Smooth981 up on Instagram. But for now, let's give you all the different platforms that you can join the conversation with us on. So you can send WhatsApp messages in to 0809 440 You can use Twitter. We are at Smooth981 on the live feed. There's a lot of different avenues wherever you are in the world, wherever you're listening to us from or watching us from, for you to join the conversation. So go ahead, do so. Let's hear your thoughts. All right, starting off with news in from the Punch. Transport fares rise. Filling stations sell petrol above 200 naira. It's no news that we are currently living in the time of fuel scarcity, and it looks like cost of transportation has increased in line with that, with transport fares increasing by more than 300% for both inter and intra-city transport, and motorists besieging the few filling stations that have actual PMS still available to sell, and some of them selling them as much as 200 naira per liter, even above that. Deva, what would you say to this? And of course, to everybody who's listening to Freshly Pressed right now from a few Q, we see you, we hear you, we feel for you. Deva, your thoughts?
It's just an incredible situation, the state of the nation at this point. And we know that one of the products that has a direct impact that we use daily and that affects everybody, literally everybody, is petroleum. And at this moment, the headline of this story is stating one of the aspects that the scarcity of fuel directly affects, which is transport cost. Now, the situation is that there seems to be an unofficial price hike in the pump price of fuel. Like you mentioned, it's selling conveniently at pumps at 200, and in Abuja, that's even here in Lagos. And in Abuja, it's selling, as they said in the article, that marketers are selling freely. That's unhindered at 300, and in some locations 400. Okay, now
In fact, they said in some independent petrol stations between 350 and
and 500,
500
yes.
a liter.
Now that's just
Craziness.
amazing, and that's why I called it an unofficial price hike, because it's unhindered. Nobody's stopping them. Nobody's clamping them down. It seems as if there's a silence from government or the regulatory agency. Now, that's one issue. One issue is the price hike. The second issue is that is it a case of when the price is hiked, then the fuel is available? Because even at that, we're still experiencing the product scarcity. It's unavailable in most places. The queues are literally everywhere around the nation in the 36 states. And we can call it that the petroleum marketers are exploiting the scenario. Now, the independent stations, like you said, are selling at 500. Transporters have raised their prices, obviously, because they're buying their base product at a higher price to almost 300%, both intercity and intracity. Like in Ilorin, a trip that would take 50 naira is now going for 200, 300 naira. Interstates, a trip from Ilorin to other states that would have cost 800 naira is now being sold at 1.5 or 2,000, 3,000. Now, Ipman earlier in the week did say, that's Independent Markets Association, that the depot price had increased, that it was no longer at, I think, around approximately 120 to enable them sell at the regulated, subsidized 165. That they're buying it at 180.
At 180,
So
yes.
it's literally impossible for them to resell at 165 without making and incurring a direct loss to themselves. Now, you see, my biggest issue, and I say this all the time, is that with this scenario, with this level of failure in supply, how come nothing is consequences are not being meted at where it's the government or the regulatory aspect? The position we've heard from NMPC initially, when they said, oh, that there was bad fuel, some of their contractors brought it in who denied eventually. They now said, okay, well, the Minister of State for Petroleum was like, okay, this is not the time to trade blames. Let's see how we can resolve the situation. They gave us end of February. Here we are in March, and the situation not only has persisted, but it's gotten worse.
Now,
Now,
we did try to reach out to the public relations officer of the corporation, but to no avail. You were go on, Deville. I just wanted
yes.
to put that in.
Now it seems as if they've been confused up to this point because even as of this week, what's today, Wednesday, as of Monday, they started saying that well there were extra supply of fuel coming into the country that was being delayed at sea because of the issue going on in the Baltic region. That's the Ukraine and the Russian war going on at the moment. That most of the imported fuel comes from that zone. So literally now it's almost they're trying to tell us that it's uncertain when this fuel will come into the country. What is the position of the new regulatory agency? That's the Nigerian Midstream, Downstream, and Petroleum Regulatory Agency. Now, two, the stock that's in place, this situation completely obliterates and scatters that claim that they've always had. Don't worry, calm down, do not panic buy. There's 3 months of stock on ground. From the day that this fuel scarcity started, we didn't get any extra supply. So it's safe to say that NMPC gave us a false position on what they had in place. And like I said, no consequences. What I expect right now is, first of all, the Minister of Petroleum, that's the president, should first of all relinquish his position because he's obviously not competent to handle this scenario. And then maybe some other heads should roll somewhere or someplace
As you
because
can
right now
see,
I do not see why Nigerians are keeping quiet. I do not see why we prefer to suffer and
Deville
struggle at fuel
is
stations instead
filled
of
with fire. Thank you,
carrying out
Deville.
our anger and our
Deville, I'm
displeasure
going to
with
need you
government.
to take a breath. Thank you very much.
I'm speaking for all those people.
You might be speaking for people, but I'm speaking for the station and I'm speaking for the time of the show. We do have other stories that we need to touch on, and of course, we'd love to get your take on this particular story because there's a, as you can see, feelings are heightened. We've got this message in from Joval who says, why do people not know the real profession in this country? Instead of the president to take Minister of Tourism, he decided he was going to be Minister of Petroleum Resources. And now that we don't have fuel, instead of him to address the crisis, he out of the country, says Joval. Whilst we have this one in, yes, a listener. I took a quick poll at the beginning of the show and just finding out where people were in, you know, regarding the queues and the fuel. And Tucci has just been updating us about how he actually was not even trying to buy fuel, but the traffic that has been caused by all the queues at the filling stations is just terrible. He says that he was at Aja, left at 4:30 to avoid the queues, but guess what? Still queues at 5:30, and he was updating me at 6:30. Still queues. He said 2 years later, and just 2 years later, 2 hours later, he's still not at VGC. We've got this message in from Joseph Mani who says, "You can see the glaring impunity and corruption. No punishment for the culprits who imported the adulterated fuel, and yet the president, who doubles as the minister of petroleum, is busy traveling around the place on autopilot." And keep sending in your messages. No, Vincent, I can't do that. We don't have time. Moving on. From the Premium Times now, again, Buhari travels for medical reasons without transmitting power to Oshibaja. Let's talk about this. And luckily, I'm going to come to you for this. So very quickly, the president is set to travel out of the country for about 2 weeks, largely for personal health reasons, for treatment, refusing to transfer power, the article says, to his deputy on an interim basis. Now, his office announced on Tuesday that he will be leaving for Kenya on a 3-day official visit, after which he will proceed to London for routine medical checks that will last for a maximum of 2 weeks, despite all the budgets that we have kept aside for clinics and medical centers. Your thoughts?
Okay, so there are so many angles to look at this thing from. My first thoughts in regard of this story is to say that the president of any country is the most important human resource of that country. So whatever happens, the country owes that individual to ensure that the person is all right in all ramifications, as it were. Okay, so if the president is ill or he has a medical condition that has to be resolved, a man has got to go when he's got to go. Yeah. Having said that, that is angle one. Angle two for me is to say that of all the issues that, of all the things about the focus on this, it is about transmission of power that we seem to focus, this story seems to focus on. It's not focusing on the issue that is burning in Nigeria right now, that at this point, this visit that the president has gone, the story says he's going to go to Kenya first, then he will then go to to the hospital. That means that it's not a life-threatening um, ailment that he doesn't have to go now because he's going to Kenya first. He's not going straight to the hospital wherever he's going, when he's going. So that means it's not life-threatening. So that means that visit to the doctors could be rescheduled and wait to resolve this problem. He's the minister for petroleum resources, and we have a big issue on our hand with
We have a
with
national issue that is
exactly
threatening to ground
exactly so
productivity to a halt.
that's even the one that's my own problem of all of this, right? Now, having said that, that's angle two. Then the other angle where we look at it is that I know for a fact that there was actually a letter written to the National Assembly in respect of this current travel. Now, my point has always been about this transmission of power. This announcement of the transmission of power, is it ceremonial, or is it that it is implied that once the president is not available within the boundaries of the country, the power automatically transfers to the vice president? Or we've had since the time of President Umar Musa Yar'Adua that the president in this day and age of internet, of conference calls and all that, can run the country from anywhere in the world where he is. That's been some argument that some people have used. Some people are insinuating that he's refusing to transmit the power officially, maybe in writing, because of events that has happened in the past. But for me, in all of this, most important for me is that the president cannot afford to abandon ship in the middle of a crisis. We're in the middle of a big crisis right now. More than half of Nigerians are on the road. Some slept at filling stations. Some are at the bus stops hoping to get a walk today.
Some
Have no plans of leaving home. Some hospitals don't have, some people can't get access to a lot of things. Food cannot move from the farms to the city centers because there is no fuel to run these things. So that is big enough for the president to reschedule his visit because it is not life-threatening.
Thank you, Lakanle. All right, let's move on now. Punch news, and there's a lot of news that is just getting people's emotions heightened. This one in says a national, or rather, federal government loses out. National Assembly affirms state power to collect VAT. So, Devo, hearing from you on this one, let me just give a brief background to the federal government's plan to retain the collection of value-added tax despite a federal high court ruling. Hit a brick wall yesterday as the National Assembly rejected a proposal seeking to shift the collection of VAT from the concurrent to the exclusive legislative list, effectively leaving the decision to the Supreme Court, which is hearing the matter. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, the truth is, this time is actually not enough to digest this story because there's so many juicy nuggets involved. We will highlight a few.
I mean, we had 68 amendments that were voted on in the two chambers, so there's a lot.
Today's Wednesday, right? We actually need a Lagos Talks on this because people need to understand, because this is where it affects people. Now, the few we'll highlight here is, like I said, Nigerian women arise. The first one, which I think had been on the lips of people for some time before this fuel crisis came on board, was the issue of the VAT. Remember, there was a high court ruling whereby the River State Governor Nelson Wike picked up on and said that it was not stated specifically that VAT would be collected by the federal government. Hence, he said because of that omission, the states were entitled to collect. Hence, the FIRS picked it up and said no, that it was the federal government that was meant to pick it. So they took two actions. First of all, they got an order by another high court, an appeal court, which said that they should stay on the matter until reviewed. And at that point, Lagos had joined in the matter with River State and already moved with the state assemblies to be able to pass a bill within their states. However, now that the constitutional arrangement was being made, it was heard or rumored that FIRS had lobbied the National Assembly to quickly introduce it into the exclusive list so that the federal government would be covered by law in the collection. However, the National Assembly in this constitutional review voted against it, okay? So what that means is that, as from the article, that Lagos State, River State, yes, have been speaking that the National Assembly had done well. However, I believe the federal government, who is represented by the FIRS, will take the matter to the Supreme Court for a final position. Now, that's one area. The second area seemed, as the article states, there seems to be this apparent anti-women or anti-gender stance of the National Assembly, whereby they rejected a lot of pro-women or pro-gender bills. This is despite the fact that the First Lady, Aisha Buhari, was in the House within the week. Even the wife of the Vice President, Dolapo Osinbajo, as well as the Minister of Women Affairs, Pauline Tallinn. The first one had to do with the affirmative action on female seats within the National Assembly. I think they were seeking some extra seats that would be allocated to women, and it failed because out of the 390 people that voted, 50 voted against it, 30 were for it. Now, the speaker also vetoed the one that had to do with creating a 35% quota for women in the presidential and state cabinets. I mean, he'd even allow that to pass, even though some people said reduce it to 20. Well, I really want the Nigerian women to sponsor the Speaker of the House to a trip to Rwanda and South Africa. Let him go and see where women are capable and are empowered and are making things happen. Now, what I would say is that women are more than men in this country. So once again, we are denying or literally being insensitive to the constituencies that really matter. The same way that the youth earn 75% portion within the country, they need to rise. Now, like I said, there are many other bills that failed. First of all, the bill on the qualification for indigenization, that's very important. We've had many issues of when someone gets married, and because of that, they're not allowed to get a political position simply because
Yes.
they were from another state. That failed. So that means we're still going to have that issue.
Oh
The,
boy. Mm-hmm.
the issue on citizenship, where someone marries a foreigner and they're not allowed to also participate fully simply because they came from a foreign land.
Okay, we also talk about diaspora voting that people that failed as well.
Yes, I mean, like I said, there's so many major issues that failed, and this is where,
Unfortunately, this is first press and we have more
yes,
stories. But yeah, so
yes, we need
we
more
had the
time.
Lagos talks. We had the Lagos talks on that yesterday, and trust me, there's going to be another one
Mm.
because there is so much to unpack from this story. Your messages are coming in, but we still have more. We have this one in from the Premium Times. National Assembly throws out bills to grant life pension and immunity for Senate President, Speaker, and deputies. Luckily, I mean, some good news. Your thoughts?
If you ask me, um, the whole idea of this bill in itself was a waste of legislative time. So I wonder how and where people at our level sit to think of bills for this kind of things. Here we were, every day the government says, I don't have money, I don't have money, right? So if you do this, you'll be increasing the cost of government that everybody is shouting, let us cut down on the cost of government. So how somebody from within this knowledge, this fact that Nigeria does not have so much money to throw around, somebody sits down to write a bill for this to happen, and then people sit down to debate it, it beats my imagination. Now, having said that, the other bit of it now is that maybe then the good news is that it then reduces the pressure on everybody wanting to be in the House or in the Senate or and wanting to be Senate president. Because, of course, one of the attractions then will be, so if I'm Senate president for one day, I'll get pension for life. I'll get immunity while I'm there. So maybe
Well,
that's a
the
bit of
immunity will last for one
maybe
day,
that
but
yes
still.
maybe that's the bit of the good news that okay, so is the pressure to be Senate president for whatever reason will reduce on every member of the Senate and the House of Rep. Okay, but by and large, I think that for what it is what the drama, even it is said there that the Senate president himself said it trying to control his laughter. Is let me quote what he said. He did not announce the number of senators that registered. He simply said this bill has conclusively failed. He said, trying to control his laughter. Even he, the president himself, knows that it's a joke. You know.
Non-starter. All right, we've got messages in, and Devo, your clarion call has found people. So we have this one in from Banji who says, "Thanks, Devo, you've hit the nail on the head. I don't understand why we're all quiet. The fuel situation is causing so much hardship, and no one is talking to us or taking responsibility. It is tough being a Nigerian." Whilst Cisco Delgado says, "We are yet to see the darker side of that fuel scarcity. They've blamed importers. Now they're blaming the Ukraine-Russian crisis. messages. He says, God bless you, Devo. This one in from Vincent. Well, Vincent, you read. I'm not sure I'll be able to read those messages. Joseph from Battery says, leave Buhari alone. Since Amumu never do, he should enjoy himself. In South Sudan, students and market women stood up to battle hardened soldiers who overthrew a democratic government, and we are here in Nigeria grumbling. He goes on to say, please let's move on. This message in Tony from Ikeja says, if the Nigerian president were in the shoes of Zelensky, I wonder what he'd do. Whilst Idimapuza from Surulere says, the Minister of Education, Adamu walked out on National Students' Body for complaining about his son's schooling and graduating abroad. Now the Minister of Petroleum, Mr. President, is traveling abroad for medical checkup for 2 weeks while we are undergoing fuel scarcity. Wow. Messages are just pouring in. Do keep them coming, although actually we are getting towards the end of the show, so we will need to take some more. We'll take some more stories now. So let's take a look at this one from the Vanguard newspaper. Federal government plans 15 billion naira revitalization fund for its polytechnics. We heard from the acting permanent secretary of the Federal Ministry of Education, Mr. David Gander, who spoke as a representative of said Minister of Education, Malam Adamu, saying that the government is also going to planning to review the scheme of service of polytechnic staff, as well as resolve the issue of the consolidated tertiary institution salary structure migration. Oh, Devo, let's take a look at this.
Well, this is the article doesn't state about their impending strike, but the truth is this retreat that they had covered some of the issues that they had been clamoring for. Now, even though they had released through the acting permanent secretary that 15 billion will be allocated for the revitalization fund, that is still in principle and on paper it has not taken place. Now, it had to do with the criteria for promotion of staff from one level to the other. It also had to do with the improving of the quality of the research, teaching, and learning of polytechnic education. Now, we gloss through that very easily, but let me repeat myself. The research, some of us in this country have forgotten that education requires research, meaning you just can't keep the same thing going on and on. You have to think and work through new things. And polytechnics are particularly suited to address this. The teaching is another aspect which has become very dilapidated simply because we haven't looked at monitoring and evaluation of the teaching levels in this country. Learning is where the students come in. That quality has been reduced as well. So this 15 billion, it's not enough. However, we want to see it come to pass. Now, this funding, they said, is being made possible from the budget from the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, as well as the CBN and the Niger Delta Development Commission, as the NDDC. Now, the executive secretary of the Education Policy Board did speak to the fact that there were still debates over the conversion of polytechnics and colleges of education to universities. As you know, there's a bill in the House at the moment that seeks to make them equate them. And there are a lot of reactions to that. Some are saying that it will not serve a purpose. Some have said it's being pushed from an emotional point of view instead of a rational point, because the universities, the polytechnics, and the college of education literally were set up to serve different purposes, okay? And they're not meant to feed themselves. They're meant to serve different purposes. And it's unfortunate that it has snowballed into a situation where we even attempt to equate them. I would even recommend personally that you can take them out. If you cannot serve them, take them out. But trying to equate them is creating a bigger problem that might not augur well in the long run. But like I said, this is all in principle. We're yet to see this be implemented.
All right, this day news now. Federal government to train 45,000 teachers, and this is digital training, digital literacy training, and it's going to take place across 24 states. Lachlan, would you like to give us a little more information and your take on this?
Um, I think that this is one of the things that for many years educators have proposed to government. We've had instances where we've had private sector led training of teachers in modern today's tools of teaching students, applying, bringing in technology and all that. So this is a good one from the Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria, that they are taking this initiative, like they say on the street, at all, naim bad. we have started. So this one is starting with first 10 states, and they will do 7,500 from each of the states, and then they will go then to do another 16 states after the first one is concluded. And then hopefully the teachers who are so trained would be able to go back to the respective institutions and transmit what they've learned into action and learning to hopefully then that it will not just be training. The equipment they will need to action what they've learned would also be available in a conducive buildings, in conducive school
Environment.
buildings as well.
Because what will
Because
happen is that
there's no
without
point
that,
training people
exactly.
and then there is no tools and there is no conducive environment to act out or to teach what they've also learned. So we pray and hope that, strange that we're praying for this kind of things, but yeah. So we pray and hope that we are able to achieve this, and then we begin to grow it. This will complement what the private sector has done in terms of retooling teachers with modern day teaching methods.
All right, we've got your messages coming in. Fatima from VI says, "Good morning, Devo. The reason we haven't risen up in protest on the fuel crisis or lack of power, yes, let's not forget the lack of power, is that we are tired and no one wants to lead the charge. Government has no qualms in killing us if we do. We are just trying to exist here," says Fatima. And Kuro John says, well, we've spoken about the Minister of Petroleum and the President all in one. Sama from Lucky has something to say about women and quota systems. He says, "I'm not trying to pick a fight, but seriously, women should act up that adage that says what a woman can do, what a man can do, a woman can also do. Women should stop expecting things to be done for them,
He has
be
picked
it
a fight already.
be it transport, urgent 2K, or even political positions. They have the majority in the voting number. Instead, all these women for A or women for B, let them fight it for themselves."
He has picked a fight already.
I'm just going to leave that message where it is and quickly move on to this one from this day. Let's see if we can get a final story in. Our federal government, Nigeria ranks low in implementation of World Bank funded projects. So we heard from the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Mrs. Zainab, who talked about the issues that have plagued these projects and the bureaucratic bottlenecks and so on and so forth. We have about a minute. So Defoe, can you just quickly give us a
Yes,
rundown?
the minister held a retreat with the National Assembly members for optimization of donor finance projects in Nigeria. Now, they were said, despite the fact that the federal government had worked towards raising a donor level, especially with multilateral bodies, that the level of implementation was poor, okay, due to factors arising from bureaucratic bottlenecks, capacity challenges, political interference, and challenges associated with obtaining varied and misaligned approval processes. Okay, she's simply saying the hurdles were too many, especially between local partners and developmental partners. And this is simply what she's saying is that despite that we have gotten the money to make a difference in your lives, we're still not able to make it happen because of all these legislative issues that take place. So she was trying to work with the National Assembly to see how they could assist in trying to smoothen out this process so that the money would actually get to where it was allocated for and do the good work.
All right, and we come to the end of the show. Let me just read this one out from, wait, who is this? Ike Peter, who says, "Soon they might propose pensions for local government chairmen and ward councillors too." He goes on to say, "ASU is on strike, our health system is in shambles, and yet this is what our legislators are concerned about." He goes on to say, "I have extended the show for another 30 minutes. Continue, guys. Interesting stories this morning." Yes, thank you, Kay. Thank you for extending the show. We'll await the money. Thank you. Let me just quickly say a quick thank you to our analyst for the day, Devo. It's been a pleasure. Luckily, even more so, you can find them up on Twitter. You can find them up on social media, actually. Devo is at Devo Okorie, and Lakunle is at Lakunle70. Yes. All right. And we, of course, are at Smooth91 FM on Twitter. And we, like I said, go and check out the previous Freshly Pressed. Let's not make it an hour and a half. The previous half hour of Freshly Pressed on the behind the scenes Freshly Pressed on Instagram, where we are at Smooth981. Coming up, Lagos, you will be talking wherever you are in the world. You'll be talking on Smooth Breakfast.
First bang.
Do you have a special?